Good afternoon, beautiful people, and welcome to this virtual book launch with Ruth Frost, author of Home with Heart. My name is Pastor B. Chan, and I use she pronouns, and I have the great good fortune to serve as the current pastor of St. Francis Lutheran Church in San Francisco in California. And on behalf of St. Francis, it is my great pleasure to welcome all of you, our esteemed guests, people from the Bay Area, from around the country, and even Peter from South Africa. Welcome. To begin with, I want to introduce today's host, Jim Kowalski. Jim and his husband both are longtime members of St. Francis Lutheran Church, and they are a vital part of the congregation's life and leadership. And Jim is the current chair of the St. Francis Endowment. And I will let you take it from here, Jim.
Thank you very much, Pastor B. I'm Jim Kowalski. I'm the chair of the St. Francis Lutheran Church Endowment Committee, and I use he, him pronouns. Thank you everyone for joining us. We're so glad you all are here to celebrate the publication of Ruth Frost's fantastic book, Homes with Heart. A little bit about the St. Francis Endowment. It's a ministry of the congregation through which members and friends can permanently continue their support of the congregation and other ministries, projects, and organizations with similar values locally, nationally, and around the world, usually through bequests of estate gifts from wills and trusts. The endowment was started almost 40 years ago, and the value of the fund today is nearly $2.4 million. And the grants that are being awarded this year will total approximately $100,000. In 2019, the endowment committee was pleased that we were able to provide a $3,000 grant to Ruth to help support publishing Homes with Heart. And a little bit about today's event. A link to the endowment website is in the Zoom chat feature in case you want to learn more. There will also be additional informational links posted from me into the chat during our program today. We are recording this event and it will be available on the St. Francis YouTube channel within a week or two so that you can rewatch it and share with others. We also want to ask all of our guests today to remain muted throughout the entire program, as there will not be a time for questions or conversation among us. The panelists that Ruth has lined up will have plenty of great conversation for us to all take in, learn from, and enjoy. At the end of the program, I will be back with a special announcement about some other events we're planning, which will be fully interactive for you. And I know you will want to attend these, so please stay with us until the very end. Now, a little bit about our speaker today and our wonderful author. Ruth is well and deeply known to many of us at St. Francis and beyond. She was a pastor here for 15 years, starting in 1990, after both she and her spouse, Phyllis Zilhart, were called and extraordinarily ordained way before LGBTQIA+ pastors were allowed by the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. After moving to Minnesota, Ruth was a hospice chaplain until her retirement, accompanying the dying and their families in the final coming home moments. Homes with Heart is part memoir, part telling of our collective stories and how we form families and communities, part adventure, part prophecy, part theology, part Lutheran decorating, and part artistry expressed in ministry and ministry expressed in art. More about the book can be found at www.ruthfrostwriter.com. About 6 or 7 years ago, I was visiting Minneapolis, and Ruth and I were headed somewhere together, probably for Extraordinary Lutheran Ministries, in my rental car. I don't recall if Bruce and Phyllis were with us or not, because all of those great trips blur together after a while. I'm certain that I knew where we were going and how I had planned to get us there. Ruth kindly and lovingly spoke up from the passenger seat, saying something like, "If we take a parallel road just a few blocks over, It will take just as long to get there, but it will be a much more architecturally interesting drive. So not only can Ruth help you curate your home, she can lovingly curate your car rides for you too. Here now is our own beloved Ruth Frost to share some readings from Homes with Heart and to welcome our panelists.
Hello, everyone. I'm delighted that you have come to celebrate my book launch for Homes with Heart, Turning Living Spaces into Loving Places. Today, we are sending my book out into the world, believing that it will find those who will resonate to its stories and be inspired to share their own stories. When it left my hands, I realized that it is no longer my book, but our book. So it's only right that we celebrate together. As we celebrate, I thank our hosts, Pastor B. Chun and Jim Kowalski, Chair of the Endowment Committee, as you all heard. And I'm so grateful for the grant that committee gave me in writing this book. As I welcome you all from across the country, I am honored to be joined by my dialogue partners, Jeff Johnson, Megan Rohr, and Janine Janssen. And last, but certainly not least, I thank my partner, Phyllis Zilhart, for her boundless encouragement and patient listening at every stage of my writing. And now, a reading from Homes with Heart. Where is home? Home is where someone is expecting you, where eyes shine their greeting as you cross the threshold, and a bark trumpets you to the household. Home is where you lay down whatever is burdening you, tell whatever is bothering you, and let yourself be found. Home is where a memory, a dream, a laugh, or a cheer is freely shared until my story becomes our story and endings become beginnings. Home is where welcoming arms await you as you come into this world and sending hands bless you when you leave it. Home is the company you keep until departure time, watching with you through the night until the rising sun lights your way. Family is all your loved ones in whom you home, here and hereafter. Love is the way home. I am honored to introduce my first dialogue partner, the Reverend Jeff Johnson. Jeff is the pastor at University Lutheran Chapel, serving the University of California, Berkeley. In 1990, Jeff, Phyllis, and I were extraordinarily ordained in San Francisco. Together, we co-founded the predecessor organization for Extraordinary Lutheran Ministries and helped open doors to a more inclusive church. We have all heard the saying, home is where your heart is. But when our hearts are weary or wounded, or our lives uprooted, it's hard to find home. Sometimes we struggle to be at home within ourselves or at home with one another. This book is about our journey to find and make home in the world. We discover meaning and purpose when our living spaces become loving places. How we live in our homes will guide who we are in the world. When we extend refuge to those in search of safety, welcome, and belonging, we become part of the world's family. When we live with intention, we can be at home wherever we are. In the words of Ram Dass, all we are doing is walking each other home. But what if that is the most important thing we do in this life? Ultimately, finding home means taking a spiritual journey in good company. We are all one. Together, the way home is love. I believe the heart of every house is its hearth. By hearth, I mean whatever draws family and friends together, whether a literal hearth or the warmth of a kitchen when our favorite foods are being prepared, or the table around which we eat and tell stories, play games, and sometimes work out family issues. The hearth is a gathering space that draws us into community, but it can also hold our private moments that comfort and sustain us. In the late night hours, we may read ourselves into far-flung worlds that stretch our beliefs and inspire our imaginations. In the quiet early morning hours, before no one else has risen but the birds, we may sit eavesdropping on the sounds of creation and marvel at our place in it, or contemplate a difficult problem and draw hope from a new dawn. For every home my partner and I have lived in, this has been our mission statement. May this living space become a loving place that provides refuge, hospitality, and creative renewal to all who dwell here and all who cross its threshold. May we expand our hearts as our family reconfigures and our friendship circles widen. Through every stage of life, may this house always be a home with heart. Recently, I attended an exhibit at our local art institute that featured the struggles of the world's refugees who have been disenfranchised from home. On the wall of the exhibit were anonymous notes written in response to the question, "What is home?" 3 of them stopped me in my tracks. The first read, "Home is a time when people are there for each other, where people can grow unthreatened." The second said, "Home is a place in your heart where there is no judgment, where your heart sings and you can breathe." The third said simply, "Home is what was taken from me." As we home in this world, we must never forget that justice is what love looks like in public. We start where it begins, in our own home, with our own families. We start with ourselves. It was a crowded department store at holiday time. Harried people milled about vying for the sale items. Waiting for my friend to finish her shopping, I noticed a small child in distress. He was alone, having been lured away by the toy aisle and now realizing he had become separated from his mother. As he called out for her through tears, I approached to comfort him. He looked at me, wanting to come to me, to anyone who could help. But knowing he was not supposed to speak to strangers, he stood frozen in panic and then backed away, still crying. I stopped my approach and asked a store clerk to announce where he was while I kept an eye on him just far away enough not to cause him to bolt. The announcement of a lost child echoed over the loudspeaker with directions as to his whereabouts. Soon his mother arrived. He ran to her and threw both arms around her leg. As he looked up at her, she bent over, shaking her finger in his tear-stained face and screamed, "How many times have I told you not to wander off? When we get home, you'll get what you deserve." My heart sank, wondering what home was like for him. I don't know their story and cannot judge their circumstances, but I ached for the little one who was lost and then found, but not welcomed home. His need haunted me that day, and I wonder where he is 45 years later. His need is everyone's need, to be found when we are lost, to be enfolded in the arms of love, and to be welcomed home. Jeff, thanks for being part of this book launch today. Our history together and your presence today means so much to me. You have always been a force for justice, love, and I'm glad to have this chance to dialogue with you, and I'm so glad to know you.
Thanks very much, Ruth. It's a delight to be here, and it's a delight to have read your book and to be able to commend it to others who are with us. You have said so much in these readings. I want to focus on a couple of things and get you to elaborate maybe just a bit more. In your title for the whole book, which is really great, the title "Homes with Heart," where you talk about finding and making home in the world. You use the phrases "with heart," "space into place," "living into loving," and then there's this verb that just means everything to me, right? Turning, space into place, living into loving. Turning can be transformational, right? And it can also be directional, how we turn from ourselves to others, how we turn from our families to the needs of those around us. And I'm wondering, because I think turning doesn't come easily to us, what helps us, what nudges us, what inspires us to turn, to transform, to shift directions? If you have just a few thoughts on this.
Whoa, Jeff, you know how to ask the deep questions.
You write the deep books, Ruth. Thank you very much for this. But we only have 5 minutes, so it has to be quick.
Oh,
I'm just aware of, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I'm aware of my inner resistance to the turning living into loving, and turning space into place, right? And turning toward heart. And your book, the stories you tell, nudged me in the right direction.
Thank you for that. Well, you know, when you reach grandma status, you really learn from the little ones, and you realize that your legacy is what they absorb from you. And we've had our little guy, Ciel, in our lives for the last 4.5 years. And it really crystallizes for me what's important in life and how important it is to love the next generation. You know, we love our daughter dearly, and she had a lot of qualms about bringing a child into our world, because our world is so perilously at risk these days in so many different ways. And so I think just having the experience of getting to be a grandparent has shown me how important it is for us to be there for the young ones coming up, and to be there for the young adults who are really trying to make a difference in their way. And I am just, my heart aches for the challenges that are before these next generations. And I think we have to somehow take a stance that says, no matter what, we live with integrity. We live knowing we are part of a whole, and our lives need to reflect that. And I know that's a rather general statement, but that's,
I love that though.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. And it really fits really well with the two little stories that you told, the one about the refugees, the exhibit, and then the little boy lost in the department store, and this ache that you have, that you wrote about for the little ones who lost, then found, but are not welcomed, and the connections that we need to make between the tables that we sit around at home and the communal tables that we occupy in public, where the love that we know in family and in good friends and in partnered community, that love finds justice in public, finds justice in the world, creates a transformation for these little ones, for those who cannot find welcome home. Thank you for your words, Ruth. I think we're out of time. It goes so quickly.
You are. I'm supposed to be the timekeeper, and I couldn't break in on 1 minute because that was lovely. So yes, you guys are done.
All right.
Another reading from Homes with Heart. Hospitality in the Era of AIDS. In 1993, our congregation sent a contingent of members to participate in the March on Washington for Liberation. Before the march, Phyllis and I decided to walk the Names Project quilt memorializing the 129,491 people who had died of AIDS. We thought of the many lives we had personally loved and lost in our first 3 years of living in San Francisco. We paused at a square on which people were writing new names. Phyllis added the names from our community. When she was done, we gazed out at this vast comforter of sorrow blanketing the Washington Mall. Through eyes blurred with tears, we watched the sky darken to a vivid violet. Standing under clouds swollen with raindrops, it felt like the heavens joined all of us in our mourning. As we took the path out, we were caught up short by a square with these words: "There is a land of the living and a land of the dead. The bridge is love, the ultimate meaning, the only survival." That day, love and sorrow were inextricably entwined. Back in San Francisco, we resumed our work. Among the many tourists who came for sightseeing, there were guests who came to grieve the imminent loss of their gay sons dying of AIDS in the city hospitals. Our congregation was located within a block of a new hospice and the premier medical center for the treatment of people with AIDS. Recognizing the need for temporary guest housing for grieving parents, the congregation made apartment units available for them in an adjacent building the church owned. From parents, we heard, "Our home congregation doesn't even know why we're here. We couldn't tell them we have a gay son, let alone a son with AIDS. We never knew a church like this existed." One frail gay man who had been a visitor several times lingered after church with his partner to talk to us. He said, "I need a community in which to die, and my partner needs a community in which to grieve." We know churches that pity us because we're dying of AIDS, but wouldn't think to support us as a couple apart from AIDS. Yours is not like that. You honor our relationships in sickness and in health. You show us respect, not pity. We're glad to be here. We want to become members. After standing outside so long, we've finally come in. We're home. Jeff, we shared such life-changing ministry in those years. You ushered us into the pandemic of AIDS as you grieved friends that you knew were dying. I invite you to share whatever is on your heart.
Thanks so much, Ruth. You know, I so appreciated your quote in your writing from Thornton Wilder. "There is a land of the living and a land of the dead. The bridge is love." And I remember that quote from our time together when we were in ministry in the midst of this first epidemic. And I appreciate your writing about the sorrow and the grief and the resilience and the anger and the fortitude that it took to care for one another in the midst of, you know, so much around us that was oblivious to what was going on, so much in the government and in the church and in families. This phrase that you quoted, "We never knew a church like this existed." People never knew love like this existed or families like this existed. And it is Ronald Reagan's shame, George Bush's shame, the church's shame, these families' shame, that they never knew that this kind of church love family existed. I'm wondering, you know, that epidemic really revealed again what justice looks like and what love looks like in public, what status quo challenging love looks like and affirmational love looks like. And it's hard to think about that epidemic and the lessons learned, the lessons we all experienced, what we have taken with us from that, and to think about this current pandemic and the lessons that we will take from this. And I continue to be amazed that public love does not come more easily in the midst of what we're going through now. What are the lessons that you think we're going to take with us from the pandemic that we're experiencing now that are informed by the lessons you took from the epidemic then?
Oh,
Silence equals death.
well, silence equals death is certainly one of them.
Yeah.
And politicizing equals death as well. And I think, and those of us who believe strongly in the importance of the vaccine, need to be careful not to demonize or politicize the vaccine. And there are times when I just get so frustrated with the unwillingness to see the urgency of the preservation of life. And it angers me. And it's so easy to slip into, well, if that's what you're going to do, you deserve to die, which is awful. And yet that's, I confess that I have some of those moments and I hate them. I hate the moments.
Yeah.
And so I have to work on myself with respect to this current epidemic, and just continue to pray and to work for greater awareness, and try to reassure people who have misgivings. In the beginning of the epidemic, I was so concerned for Phyllis's safety because she was working in facilities which had high rates of death due to COVID.
1 minute.
And it scared the heck out of me. And she didn't have proper PPE back then. And somehow, she got through it. So I think also of the workers who are on the front lines and the cost that incurs for their mental well-being, just being so inundated by the desperate needs and numbers of people that they serve. So I don't know, Jeff, I don't have a magic answer. I sure pray a lot these days. And I pray for people who politicize the issue. I pray for my cohorts who just can't, who look scornfully at people who don't get the importance. So I don't know what to say. It's much bigger. It's much bigger than any one person can imagine.
Most definitely. I know that, and we're out of time again, but Ruth, thank you for this opportunity to be in dialogue with you. And I really look forward to a chance to explore further, over coffee someday when I'm back in St. Paul, your book, and to be together in your home. Blessings.
I would cherish that, Jeff. Thank you. I'm privileged to introduce my second dialogue partner, the Reverend Dr. Megan Rohr, Bishop of the Sierra Pacific Synod of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, and the first openly transgender bishop in a mainline Christian denomination. Woohoo! Another reading from Homes with Heart. Getting to know our homeless neighbors. After we moved into the church parsonage, we restored a small overgrown front yard garden. We installed benches and let it be known that our garden was open to anyone. Elders out walking paused to rest, as did homeless people. We got to know our homeless guests first by their street names, but when they had begun to trust us, they would share their real names and tell us their stories. Some homeless people began camping at night in the walkway between our garden and the child care center, which was connected to our apartment. Directly above their encampment was our daughter's bedroom. Those that camped there knew they and their shopping carts filled with their belongings needed to be gone before the child care center opened each morning. To safeguard the area, a volunteer from the congregation came every morning to sweep the walkway and check the garden for refuse and dirty needles. In summer, our regulars sometimes drank too much and talked too loud and long into the night. After several nights of this, I leaned out the window and scolded them for continually waking our daughter. I told them if they couldn't keep their noise down, I would ask the police to move them out. Shocked, Noelle exclaimed, "Mom, I only wanted you to ask them nicely if they could be quieter. Some of them are my friends." One such friend was a man named Aaron. Noelle and Aaron had a special bond. Whenever she saw him, she would run to him and with her arms wide open. He would scoop her up and twirl her around in a dancing embrace, his toothless smile radiant with delight. Aaron regularly distributed a newsletter called The Street Sheet to passersby. It was written by homeless people who shared their stories. It kept visible those who had gotten work and were beginning to thrive, and those who had died on the streets and deserved to be remembered in their passing. It contained the raw poetry of the streets, giving the public a firsthand account of street life under the freeway overpass or in tent encampments on the Civic Center Mall. Their newsletter was a way to express themselves and say, "Look at me, I'm human. I have a story beyond what you think you know." So, congratulations, Megan, on your new calling as bishop. It's a tall order, but I'm so glad that you are here. In your role as street vicar, I know you understand at firsthand what life on the streets is like. I'm honored you could join us today and share your thoughts.
Well, thank you. I'm so pleased to be here, and honestly, this is the kind of writing that I've longed for you to write for so long, because you've been this so beautifully embodied person who's able to take heartache and difficulty and turn it into poetry, and so it was a delight to read. I'll tell you though, even before the homeless part of this section, the thing that stuck with me is, I know we've come a long way. I've got a fancy new role now, but the very first sentence that you moved into a parsonage. I remember in South Dakota, in candidacy, they gave me a celibacy partner, someone who was a lesbian, who was to live in the closet. And she told me all about how you take the pictures down when someone comes to your house and your partner leaves and comes back after meetings. And I remember when I came to Berkeley and I had just heard that you were moving into the parsonage, it expanded my idea of what was possible. I think maybe in the way that my being a bishop has expanded possibility for some. And so I wanted to thank you for being someone who lived in a parsonage and to honor how far we have come, right? But also you have been a mentor for me, because as a parent of a child who lives in San Francisco, there is this question of, will we let our children just live an idyllic life in Golden Gate Park? Or will we let them know all of the grittiness of San Francisco life, and the fact that you love people on the streets enough not just to care for them and feed them on Sundays, but to introduce them to your children is a different kind of special love. Can you speak a little bit about how you felt like you could have a family on a very public street, so very near to your congregation, and be faithful on the sidewalk?
Well, we were so privileged to be part of that congregation because they really got the importance of justice. in tandem with love. It wasn't the kind of love that kind of looks down on, or patronizes others. So, I mean, I think we had a community that had already paved the way and were determined to make a difference. And when you're representing that kind of community, you have to step into your better self, So I would say I was stretched by the congregation as much as we led the congregation stretched us. And I mean, San Francisco just brought the homeless right in our path, and it didn't matter where you were in the city. You couldn't look away. And that's a good thing. And so I think I think also when you have homeless regulars and you do get to know them, you get to know their names and you get to know their life stories, it changes, it makes it very, very difficult to dismiss their lives and their concerns and their pain. So, and the other thing is, I think Phyllis is okay with me saying this, but she had a cousin in San Francisco that was homeless. And every now and then he would let her meet him for coffee, and she would take him out for coffee, but he wouldn't let her do anything more than that. And I'm sure there was shame around that and worry that she'd be bringing it back to his family, to his parents, which she wouldn't. So that brought it home more directly to me because it was part of our family, and you can't divide the world between us and the other. So even though we'd like to try to do that to make our consciences, somehow numb our consciences. I thank you. I mean, you lived among homeless people. You took risks that I wouldn't have taken. So you led the way for me on that one. Yeah.
It's definitely a mutual love and admiration society for sure. learning from each other in every way that we can. And
yeah. I am so glad that you are the next generation of, this office that you've assumed. And frankly, if I had known you had been running for bishop, I wouldn't even have asked you to be a panelist because I would have thought that's not fair. And the same with Jeff. I would have kept you off that list, but I'm so glad I didn't know.
Sometimes extraordinary is defined a different way than it used to be.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
All right, time. Back to a reading, Ruth.
Healing painful associations with home. In my work with people who have experienced trauma in a home.
Oh, sorry.
You okay?
Are we supposed to be doing the video? I'm so sorry. Did we miss the video? I think we did. Let's keep going with this, and then Jim, let's do the video after that. Sorry about that. My timing was off. Let's keep moving along. And then we've got a video to share.
In my work with people who have experienced trauma in a home, I have used rituals as a means of reclaiming living space through reframing negative associations. I met Sarah while facilitating a group that was discussing life transitions and their effects on homing. I indicated that our final session would end with a blessing ritual of someone's house. This turned out to be Sarah. I learned in a private conversation with her that she had a story to tell. She was a single parent with an adult son who had gotten into heavy drug use and the troubles that went with it. Having lost his housing, Jason had been staying temporarily with his mother, bunking on the couch in the basement family room with his dog, Buddy. Night after night, he would come home late after partying with friends. Lying awake worrying, Sarah could never fall asleep until he arrived home safely. One night, Sarah was wakened by Buddy pawing her. She got up, following Buddy to the basement stairway. Snapping on the light, she saw her son lying motionless on the basement stairs. Heart pounding, Sarah raced down the steps and immediately called 911 for help. She then administered CPR until the medics arrived to take over and rushed him to the hospital. Thankfully, Jason lived and went through a treatment program, remaining in transitional housing afterwards. Meanwhile, at home, Sarah became stuck in the memory of finding her son unconscious. She said, "Every time I go downstairs to do laundry, I am flooded with memories of that night." She told me she was taking care of Buddy while Jason was gone, but would leave him with her neighbor the day of the home blessing. She said she preferred to invite the group to the blessing without telling them beforehand why she wanted one. We decided to save the basement as the last space to be blessed in the house, ending outside with the blessing of the garden, the symbol of light and new life. The group decided we should have potluck breakfast before the ritual. The day of the blessing, group members arrived in high spirits, eager to share food and experience the ritual. Sarah and I selected some readings for group members. Sarah chose symbols of significance for each room. When we finished blessing the main level, we went down to the basement and gathered in a circle at the base of the stairs. I dimmed the light and a hush swiftly descended over the group. Standing where she had discovered Jason, Sarah lit a single candle and told her story by the light of its small flame flickering gently across her expressive face. When she was finished, I invited her to step inside our circle to receive spontaneous blessings from group members. Sarah stepped in and the group drew instinctively closer. The atmosphere of high spirits had changed, and in its place, a quiet power settled over us. Each member of the group took turns stepping inside the circle with Sarah. Gently placing a hand on her shoulder, they graced her with their blessing. When we were finished, we ascended out of the darkness into the bright sunshine of the backyard garden. There, his nose pressed close against the fence mesh, was Buddy, softly whining. I turned to Sarah and said, "Given his role in this, I think he deserves to join us. What do you think?" She immediately agreed, and Buddy joined our circle, sitting quietly in our midst for the last blessing of the garden and all its creatures, particularly the one with the wagging tail. Afterward, people lingered, enjoying the bond that comes with participating in something that was more important than they had expected. They knew each one had a part in awakening Sarah from her nightmare. I later received a note of thanks from Sarah stating how beautiful the experience had been. "My house is now my home again." Megan, I invite your comments or questions.
This story reminds me of my kind of chaplain work just prior to 25 days ago when I became a bishop, being a chaplain for the San Francisco Police Department, which has involved caring for the medical examiners kind of over the last 4 years. And one of the medical examiners told me that they believe this year, with the number of deaths that we've had with fentanyl and meth, that we're likely to have as many deaths from drug overdose as in the beginning years of the AIDS crisis here in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And you're someone who has kind of lived through so many hard things, and particularly with those who are in the midst of their own kind of pending dying. And I was wondering if you had any words of comfort or speaking to those aching places of all of us who have been touched by addiction in our lives, and if you have words kind of for people who are in that ache place.
Well, addiction has been in my family life. I had a sister who's now deceased who struggled with addiction. And fortunately got into sobriety, but then when she got cancer, ended up having to be on drugs that were difficult for her. It's heartbreaking. I have no words adequate to the pain that families experience with their loved ones and their loved ones experience as their lives deteriorate. So Megan, I don't know. I think your question is so large and deep. I don't even know if we can contemplate it all. I think we just need to take whatever actions we know to take and to see people, not addicts. To see the person that God has created and loves, no matter what has happened with them. I think, obviously there are treatment programs that are needed and necessary and probably overwhelmed. But the one thing that is available is love. We can all call upon that and at least be in solidarity. And you certainly were. I mean, you did it in spades. I remember being blown away when I heard what you were doing, and I thank you for it.
Thank you. I've also, like, in conversations with you, been really moved. And you write about it in several places in this book about like your journey and experience of having polio, right? And the way that that kind of early shaping of your body and this knowing that you were gonna have a life that kind of took a different kind of turn through it. And I've always kind of wondered if starting life, going through that journey shaped the other ways you were going to kind of take a crooked path through the world.
Huh. I had never thought about that. That's an interesting insight. I'm sure that there's something of that. I mean, I certainly was part of a pandemic, and as a 4-year-old kid, obviously I didn't understand what that meant. But as I got older, it hit home in some ways. I was fortunate to come out of that children's ward much more intact than most of those children did. So I think I just call upon that as some commonality with people who struggle. But I don't think I would have identified that until you brought it up. So, and life is different for me as I age. I'm feeling the effects of polio more now. Anyhow, but on the whole, I've been truly blessed in remarkable ways. And it has served to remind me of the importance of being there for people who have much more suffering than I have had.
Well, it's certainly always been a through line where even if something was tough, you claim it as not being as tough as someone else and as an opportunity to journey with them. And so I think it's just a part of your character, maybe, or maybe it's your faith walk. But I've always appreciated it, and I'm just delighted that you were able to be honestly embodied in intersectional ways, even before we named that as a thing that people would try to do in the world.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Jim, now we can have the video. Thank you, everybody. You want to introduce it?
Yes, next we take you on a brief video tour of our home in Minneapolis. The viewing quality may vary depending on your device, so there's no need to make any adjustments for viewing this 5-minute video. Here we go. Well, hi, dear.
Hi, darling.
Welcome to our home. Come on in. This room that you're entering is our porch where Phyllis and I used to have coffee in the mornings together. But since we have a 4-year-old grandson, it's become his room now. He's passionate about cars and trucks. The stained glass that you're looking at is one of my pieces. What you're seeing on the wall is a stained glass installation that I put in a couple of years ago, taking care to make sure that it meshed with the Craftsman era. We're looking now at our fireplace area. When we bought the house, we hoped that we would have a fireplace, but we just couldn't afford to add that. So we've got an electric fireplace, and I had a lot of fun creating the surround, which is the tiles here. These are stained glass tiles overlaid with brass stampings that come from nature motifs. The stained glass over here is depicting our lake cabin. This is a little drop-down desk that belonged to my mother. It was made for her by an uncle when her father died when she was only 4 years old. Above the desk is a window that is an ode to the Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis, and it shows all the characters from Narnia that are etched into the glass. This print depicts the redwoods of Muir Woods, which is in the San Francisco Bay Area where we used to live and we loved. The bowl you're looking at was made by a dear friend of mine named David. I love these brass bells that have animals on top of them, and Ciel loves to ring them. So I have this little collection that just puts the finishing touch on this beautiful old buffet. Welcome to our cozy kitchen. The cabinetry you're looking at is original to the home and was lovingly preserved by the previous occupants. On this wall of the kitchen, we have cabinetry that was not original to the home, so I decided to have fun with it and make it an art piece. And it's done in the folk art style. You can see on the left-hand side that it depicts the oil of gladness from Hebrew scripture. And above you have the sun and the moon, the yin and yang of life, and the painting of the house with the key is just a reminder of the importance of hospitality. And then on the right here, we have the cup of blessing. We're upstairs now in a room that we have dubbed the reading room, but it also doubles as our guest bedroom. So we've wanted it to be as cozy as possible. And over here, in any room with whimsy, you have to have a bear. And here you're looking at a tall boy that was passed on to Phyllis from her dad's side of the family. And above it is a picture, a photograph of a Victorian house that Phyllis's great-grandfather on her mom's side of the family built. This room is made for rest and relaxation, but sometimes we just want to float down the river.
Hi, everybody. This is Phyllis. I'm so proud of Ruth's book.
and we thank you for your support.
Thanks, friends, for coming to my book launch. I hope you enjoy the book. I know I enjoyed writing it. Blessings as you home with heart. I'm delighted to introduce my final dialogue partner, Janine Janssen, whom I met as a parishioner of St. Francis many years ago. Janine and her spouse, Mari Irvin, are soon poised to move back to the Bay Area. Janine is retiring from her administrative work, and Mari recently sold her bookstore, presenting a copy of Homes with Heart to the new owners. Thank you for that, Mari. Janine and Mari are stalwarts in their work of justice making and hospitality. This is our final reading today from Homes with Heart. Meeting heart to heart when memory fades. When I first started hospice work, the one population I was uneasy about visiting were elders with dementia. I wondered how two minds could meet under those circumstances, but I soon realized that it wasn't the meeting of minds that mattered, but rather the meeting of hearts. Dolores was completely nonverbal and wheelchair bound. She was physically and emotionally locked in. As a result, it was difficult to tell how much Dolores could comprehend. Sometimes I sang to her because music soothed her. One winter day, I found Dolores alone in her room, sitting in her wheelchair, facing the wall. The lights were off and the curtains closed. She was awake and motionless. I greeted her and told her it was a beautiful winter day and the snow was falling. I invited her to watch it fall with me. There was no reply or change of expression. I opened the curtains and gently turned her chair to face the window. I drew another chair up close to hers. We sat side by side in silence, watching the snowfall. Finally, she gave a deep sigh and, still gazing out the window, gently leaned her head against mine. After a while, I said, Dolores, you are much more than you can tell me, but God knows all of you and loves you. God has not forgotten you. At that, silent tears coursed down her cheeks. We sat head to head until an aide came to take her to supper. Dolores taught me the power of presence in the midst of loss. She also taught me to enter her desolation and abide there with her before offering reassurance of her value to God. Annette was a socially skilled woman who suffered from dementia but could still enjoy conversation. She could recognize my face after several visits without remembering how she knew me. I found that simply saying, I know your daughter, was enough to relieve her anxiety. One day, Annette said, I want to ask you something. Encouraged to go ahead, she continued, well, you know I'm not religious. I mean, I believe in God, but her voice trailed off. I replied, many people find God in places outside church. Annette nodded and continued, how do we know God is, she trailed off again. Are you asking how we know God is really here with us? I wondered. Yes, she responded emphatically. I remarked, I think anytime we open our hearts to love, God is right here in that love. That's something, she responded. I continued, God is here when we love our children. Yes, she replied. And God is there when someone is kind to us. We can't see God, but we can see love. God is in the love. You've got it, she exclaimed with excitement. After a pause, she asked, Do you think the world knows? Well, I think the world tries to know, but sometimes people lose hope when they go through hard times and the world is cruel to them. We need to tell them, Annette responded. I replied, should we pray for the world and tell the world how much God loves them? Annette nodded and folded her hands over mine immediately. As we held hands, I gave thanks for the gift of love in our lives, praying for people who are sick on her unit or going through hard times. Then I prayed for Annette and for her daughter. Afterward, Annette said thoughtfully, there's more than this world. She leaned forward and added in a conspiratorial whisper, there's something dancing out there. Annette died 3 weeks later. Janine, thank you for being part of this book launch with me. I invite you to share your reflections.
Well, thank you for asking me. I want you to know I didn't wait for the book to come out. I printed it off, 3-hole punched it, and put it in a Bible. I mean, in a binder. I don't have reflections so much as a question.
Okay.
Janine, you're muted, Janine.
A good friend now has dementia. Like Annette, he was socially skilled, but unlike Annette, he can no longer enjoy ordinary conversation. When he begins a reply or a comment, he can't finish it because he can't remember what he was going to say. Initially, our reaction was to try to fill in the blanks, but that only makes it more difficult, and it conveys unintended impatience. And we don't want our time together to be a source of frustration. However, when other people are participating and we are talking as a group, he responds to humor with laughter. And once, during a conversation about a documentary he had seen on TV weeks before, he recalled and commented himself about a fact of particular interest to him that had been reported. So these are just 2 examples of interactions. Based on your experience with dementia patients and consultation with their medical professionals, do you have any suggestions for what we might do differently?
Boy, this panel asks difficult questions. It's wonderful and daunting. Actually, I may invite Phyllis to make some remarks here too, because she actually has more clientele with dementia than I did. One of the things I learned was that in some cases, people who couldn't really understand current conversation could remember fragments of childhood experiences. And so I often went back to childhood with them and found that we had a richer ground for commonality there, because somehow some of those memories stay with you longer than recent memory. I'm not sure that I know how to respond to your current situation in your circle there, because it's inconsistent. I'm assuming you've discovered that it's inconsistent, that it's kind of random sometimes as to what people will say or remember. And that doesn't mean they'll remember it again later. So I don't feel like I have a good answer for you on that one, Janine. And is there a remark you would want to make, Phyllis? I actually will, because she has had more experience.
You know, Janine, I think you just do it heart to heart. And I think that's what you're already doing. And to keep things tangible, in the moment, not anything that you need to retrieve an answer that you have to, what'd you do yesterday? Remember the time we, nothing that there's a right or wrong answer. And so you're sharing, look at that beautiful tree out there, and we can all look at the tree together. And then, oh, I love this song. Do you mind if I play you this song I heard on the radio? And you have something that you offer. And music is one of those things that really is deep in the brain, even one of the last things. And so I think it's really just trying to be present-minded, present moment, open-hearted, all of the empathy things that I think you already do well, but really not memory, not the cognitive, but the intuitive heart energy. And I think that's where those connections still can come forth.
Well, certainly a lot of these interactions have been by Zoom and on the phone. I'm hoping that some, more of those in the future will be in person. And I do know some things about my friend's young life, not a lot about childhood per se, but certainly a lot of things about young life. And I'm thinking possibly also of bringing some pictures with me.
That's excellent.
That's a great idea.
Yeah. And I hate to say it.
Yeah.
No, visual stuff is done. Yep. And time is done, but visual things are excellent. Pictures, things that draw forth stories. That's absolutely great.
Okay. Can I make my one comment about the book?
Sure.
It's 30 seconds. Part 3, Making Living Spaces, Loving Spaces, is very timely for Mari and me. As you just mentioned, we're leaving Yachats, and we have no idea what our new living space will look like. We don't know exactly where it's going to be. And that chapter is a fantastic resource for us. And I would think for anyone who is moving and creating a new home later in life. We have already started the sacred giving that you described. Thank you so much for everything in the book, but that particular chapter is very useful to us.
Oh, good.
Thank
I'm
you.
glad.
Well, I'm going to jump in and just say thanks everybody for being part of the Zoom call. It's wonderful to have everybody here celebrating Ruth's book. I'm so proud of her and proud of this book. And just spread the word, but enjoy, as everybody has said. Jeff, Megan, Janine, thank you for your rich conversation. And everyone, thank you for this moment.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for celebrating my book launch, everybody. I am deeply grateful for your loving support and for your excitement over this book. Remember, it isn't really mine anymore. It's ours. So take it out into the world and have fun sharing it. Blessings to you all. And now back to Pastor B and Jim.
Ruth, thank you so much for this wonderful event. Thank you to Pastor Jeff, Bishop Megan, and Janine for that wonderful conversation. We're so grateful for your time and your insights with us, and we're delighted to have Homes with Heart to read and to share. And thank you to everyone who joined us today for your support of Ruth and Homes with Heart. In November, I want to tell you about 2 very special days of events we're going to have at St. Francis Lutheran Church. On Saturday, November 20th, we are honored that Bishop Megan will join us to observe the Transgender Day of Remembrance. We're just beginning the planning for this event, so please watch for more details, including the timing for that day. This gathering will be in our historic and much loved church building at 152 Church Street in San Francisco's Castro District, and it will also be live streamed on our YouTube channel. And while we don't anticipate this, in-person attendance capacity could be limited for a needed response to COVID-19. The following morning, on Sunday, November 21st, Phyllis will be our guest preacher for our 11 a.m. worship service, also in person and also live streamed. Coffee hour immediately after worship will include a 30-minute in-person question and answer session with Ruth about passages from Homes with Heart, followed by time for book signing. So please bring your questions and your books that day. It will be so wonderful to have you both together with us at St. Francis in just a few months. And we hope everyone will plan to do what I'm going to do, which is to purchase 5 or 10 or 15 copies of Ruth's book as Christmas gifts, bring them to St. Francis on November 21st, get personalized autographs from our brilliant author, and then you will have all of your 2021 holiday gift shopping taken care of. We will see you at St. Francis on Saturday, November 20th and Sunday, November 21st. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Merci
I'm so
beaucoup.
glad. I'm so glad this is being recorded because I want to keep it forever.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all of you who joined us today for this virtual book launch. I know when Ruth first approached us and said, I have this book and I want to come to St. Francis and we'll have the book launch there. And I said, oops, what do we do? It's still COVID and we don't quite know by June or July what things will be and can we be in person. So let's plan this by Zoom, which is an adventure. It was an adventure for all of us, but I'm glad we did it. Thank you for the book. Thank you for all who came today. I want to thank especially those who tried Zoom for the first time today, because I know that's very, very scary and some people did it anyhow. So good for you. And those who have to do Zoom all the time and are sick of it and still are doing it, good for you too. Thank you to all of you and for all who continue to support the mission ministry of St. Francis Lutheran Church to make this and many other events possible. Thank you and keep in touch. Bye-bye.